back in 2000, late 2007, my boss then, Paul Steiger, the editor of the Wall Street Journal, was sitting down to draw up on the back of an envelope what was going to be ProPublica. And he had sort of scribbled in very rough terms what the organization might look like. And it had editors, and it had reporters, and then we had an item that he had written down, I'll never forget this, it said Webmaster paren 2. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, those are the people that take the stories and put them up on the web, and we should have 2 of them so one of them can go on vacation. And I said, I think we may need a few more of those, whatever they are. But we actually had absolutely no idea where we were going to go. And we had the good fortune as our first hire to hire, and I don't even think he had this job, but in our mind it was Webmaster, a gentleman named Scott Klein from The Nation. And he began to think a lot bigger about what ProPublica could do. And right from the very beginning, Scott Klein said, well, what we need to do is news applications. And that immediately kind of gave me a pause. I thought to myself, what is a news application? We'd already had 1,300 people send in their resumes, so I knew what a news application was in one sense. That was one form of application. And then I thought, well, maybe what he means is a news application is like how you find something online, like Google News. You use an application to find the news. But no, that is, of course, not at all what he was talking about. In this sense, his idea, which we have begun to try to execute, was that a news application is something that brings you, makes news, delivers you news. Something very different from aggregation, something very different from really anything that had existed before in the history of the world of journalism. Now, we have, in the 5 years that we've been writing ProPublica, put up literally thousands upon thousands of stories. But by a mile, the most read thing we have ever put on the web is something we call dollars for docs. When Jeff Larson here gives you a presentation, in a minute he's going to go into some more detail about some of these things. For those of you who haven't seen it, dollars for docs is an amazing little tool. What it does is that we started off, once upon a time, a certain number of pharmaceutical companies, not all of them unfortunately, but about half of them, had to put on the internet the payments that they had made to doctors. And they have to do this every single year. It turns out that in American medicine, amazingly enough, if you were to be a pharmaceutical company and to hand someone $1,000 and say, please prescribe my medicine, that would be a bribe and you would go to jail. But if you were to invite a doctor to read the slides that you, the pharmaceutical company, prepare, word for word verbatim, and then give them $1,000, that's okay. So this all seemed very strange to us, and we thought, well, is it possible to create an application that would tell people how much money doctors take? And as you could imagine, this turned out to be a far more complicated venture than you might first think. First of all, of course, we're talking about, I've forgotten now, Jeff, so what are we up to, 14 companies, 12, I forget. 14 companies. 14 different websites, that would be 14 different scrapers that have to be written, and the companies constantly change how they present the data, so it's constantly being revised beyond that. Then at that point, what you've done is downloaded a list of names, which may or may not be listed the same way, and it is possible there may be more than one Dr. Juan Gonzalez in California. That is a possibility. And you, of course, then have to sort through, as you pull all the numbers from all the companies, making sure you don't sort of overcount or undercount. But we were able to resolve all of this, and we created a news application that, first of all, itself was news, because we were able to see which companies paid the most. It became very clear that certain doctors were getting a lot more money than other doctors. And this allowed us, in turn, to apply other kinds of journalism to the names of the people who were getting the most money. The companies had claimed that they were paying this money strictly to people who were the best and the brightest. You know, I mean, this is the best asthma doctor in the state of California. He's like, he has credibility. Well, we ran the names and addresses of the doctors who were getting the most money against the names and addresses of the doctors who had been disciplined, sued for malpractice, lost their licenses in some cases. We discovered some surprising overlaps. It turned out they weren't all the best and the brightest. Some of them were the worst and the rudest. And so that fact sort of turned into a very interesting national story. But there was more than that. This was a tool, it turned out, that could be used by you, the patient. You could be in the waiting room. You could look up your doctor and find out where he was getting $50,000 worth of payments. And then when he prescribed you a brand new antibiotic 10 minutes later, you had information that you otherwise could never have had. Beyond that, there was another interesting little problem. Most of America's medical schools banned their professors from taking these payments. Well, how do you enforce a ban like that? How would you know? Well, of course, they could go to each of the 14 websites every week and see what was listed, but amazingly enough, nobody ever did. Anyway, when we decided to test a few of these schools, Stanford Medical School was one little minor place that had such a ban. To the shock and surprise of Stanford Medical School, about a half dozen of their docs on faculty have been taking tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars because they had, quote, misunderstood the rules. So this is now for us a constantly searched database, and our suspicion is not only by patients, not only by insurance companies, but by medical schools who want to keep up with what their professors are up to. So you now are beginning to see a feedback loop in which there's news, there's an application, there's use of it by consumers, which generates more news. I don't know that we could take full credit for this at ProPublica, but it is a fact that the number and level of payments has dropped every year since we've started this. And I believe it has something to do with the fact that it's being exposed by a news application, which is news. Now, Jeff's going to again talk some more about some of the things that he's done. Following up on what Jim Schachter said, I think that there is right now in the world of journalism this fantastic new sort of kind of journalist being born. Jim mentioned Brian Boyer. We at ProPublica remember Brian very fondly because after he completed that course at Northwestern, he came to us as a summer intern, and on his first day created a news app that would alert you to any changes in a website. Now you say, well, what's the use of that? Well, Obama had just come in, and as it turned out, the Obama team was rewriting the Bush-era website. So the entries for Iraq and the entries for Afghanistan and so on and Guantanamo were all being substantively changed every day. We were getting an alert every time this happened. It was one of the most fascinating things to watch you could imagine. And Brian, did okay. I mean, he left his internship with ProPublica. He was hired by the Chicago Tribune after 3 months with us to run their 10-person data department. So he was the first intern I'd ever seen go from intern to editor and leader of a team. But that's what this field is like. And we are constantly sort of scouring the country looking for people who are able to combine these talents of code writing and computer science. And they're all very different. But I always think of Jeff's desk when I think of what am I looking for as a non-sort of coding journalist editor who really loves this stuff. If you walk by Jeff's desk, what you usually see is 2 or 3 different sort of Rubies for Rails manuals and a novel by Thomas Pynchon. So when you see somebody who's working like that, you know you're definitely onto something. I think that we're only going to see in the world of journalism a continuing expansion of this. I think the projects that we saw here today, I was here for the entire complete presentation. I thought they were all fascinating. They were all different slices of how you can use data to create a dynamic thing, which is both news and an application. And I look forward to, I think the only thing that really we're struggling with here a little bit is, we need a snappy name. In the television business, there was a fad there of something that was called a producer, reporter, editor. And a friend of mine used to call them predators. So I've been trying to work on this, and I'm running into trouble, so I think the group will start to work. At first I thought, developer reporter, D Porter. Nah. Then I thought, programmer reporter, P Porter. Nah. So I'm sticking with journalist until otherwise instructed, but I invite anybody who wants to tweet out the new name for this new animal. And I introduce you to my colleague, Jeff, who's going to tell you more about how we do it.
Yeah, we usually call ourselves new saps. I'll give you a deep order. Okay, cool. Welcome to my desktop. Okay, so I am a journalist. I am a developer. I've won awards. I've been yelled at. I've been cursed at by the head of the California Democratic Party. So it's all very exciting. It's something that doesn't happen when you're working in an actuary's office writing code to input medical payments or something. Although we actually do that. So the name of my time is Journalism and Code, News Apps at ProPublica. I'm Jeff Larson. I've been doing this for about 4 years. I thought I was also going to be a webmaster, but that didn't pan out really. So I'm going to give you a short history of data journalism. We like to call it, we have an equally ridiculous term for it. We call it computer-assisted reporting. Because, I mean, what does that mean? It's like everybody writes email, but everybody tweets. So the first example of computer-assisted reporting is in 1952. Is the UNIVAC computer that was used for the census tabulation. But CBS News had this great idea that what they were going to do is they were going to predict the election on election night, right? So like before the election came in, just like how the Times desk, they were going to call it, like this is going to happen. And then Walter Cronkite kind of doing his thing. And this is the results, and I love it. I love how polite this computer is, the most polite computer I've ever seen. And I'm sorry for the webcast. It's awfully early, but I'll go out on a limb. Eisenhower is going to win. The chances are now 0-1 in favor of Eisenhower. And I think it was wrong by 4 electoral votes. It's pretty good. Pretty good for a computer the size of this room. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. This is kind of goes back to data journalism and databases in journalism. We have this guy, Philip Meyer, writes this book called The New Precision Journalism. And basically his whole idea was, hey, let's use some statistical methods to figure out what's going on out in the world. So his big thing was surveys, and he wrote a story that's actually really great about the Detroit riots and why some people rioted and why other people rioted. And he went out and asked. And it turned out like a lot of people, I think, just were kind of drunk and just wanted to run and stuff. So it's a good story. You should check it out. And then we have PolitiFact, which is Matt Waite. Matt Waite won the Pulitzer Prize for a news application. We claim it's a news application. Other people claim it was a website, but it had structured data, and it followed, you guys have probably seen it, but in 2008 it followed the lies and truths that politicians didn't tell. And it got out a Pulitzer Prize. So that's a very funny picture. If you ever see him, make fun of him for that. Brings us back to ProPublica. So PolitiFact is right on the cusp of when we started doing it. There was also the team at the New York Times, and I hadn't yet joined ProPublica, or I was on my way there, but it kind of like woke us all up in the news, like, whoa, we can like do stuff online. We can collect data. We can tell stories within a different framework. We don't have to necessarily stick with just the written word, and we can also do data analysis. Like how UNIVAC did. But we can bring that not just to breaking news things like elections, but we can do deep dives into, like Steve said, our $dollars database, or even email targeting, or privacy online. So our mission statement at ProPublica is to expose abuses of power and betrayals of the public trust by government, business, and other institutions using moral force of investigative journalism to spur reform through the sustained spotlight of wrongdoing. And in the news apps department, we do that with code. And we have a very specific kind of way that we try and tell these stories that is maybe not is not so obvious if you don't exactly know what's going on. So I'm going to walk you through how we do those things. So here's kind of like my theory of how to tell stories through a news app. What we have is we have this concept of the far and the near.
You want to see the big story up front, and you also want to be able to say, hey, what's happening down the block from me? And this is something that's unique with code, right? You can't tell both of those stories for every single person on the printed page. So what we have here, this is a screenshot from our schools app that we did, and it shows the AP pass rate versus AP enrollment by states. It also allows you to see, like, are more people passing AP classes in Illinois than Chicago or California. So you can see on your state level how well your state is doing in academic performance. But then what we also have is this is really great. We have this near view. And our story was that we ran some statistical analysis, and we found out that when kids go to schools that are poorer schools, and we use that through free and reduced price lunch, we figured that out through free and reduced price lunch. The number of students that got free and reduced price lunch, they have less access to AP courses, so they have less access to succeed. And so what we have on our website is you can type in your school and you can compare it to a poor school near you or a richer school near you. And this tells our story for us, because what you can see, and there's a little bit of explanatory stuff, but you can see that in our let up high, 97% get free and reduced price lunch. There's only 9% of them that have access or take at least one AP. Whereas in Beverly Hills High, 6%, that's 90210, right? So 29% take an AP course, and 83% pass. So that's like access to education. So we try and do that near and far idea in our news apps. We also make sure that everybody gets byline, that we write a little lead that just says, hey, here's what it is, right? Just here's what you're looking at. Bylines are important so that people know who they can yell at. And then often we do real-time data analysis. So this is a news application that we did during the political season last year, looking at political targeting in your email inbox from political campaigns. And what this shows is we did all this crazy, fancy, like UNIVAC stuff with decision trees and natural language processing, and we were able to find out that the Obama campaign in particular, and sometimes the Romney campaign, but the Obama campaign in particular knew a whole bunch about you. So they knew how much they were listening to, how much you donated before, how much they predict you were going to donate. They knew where you lived. And you would get those really silly emails would actually be tailored to you in particular. And this is a really simple one, right? This one's just for Pennsylvania and that in North Carolina. If you lived in North Carolina, they wanted you to go to Tennessee. And if you lived in New York, they wanted you to go to Pennsylvania. To kind of bug everybody. So we do real-time data analysis. We also tell you another form of our news applications is we tell you what's happening right now. This is our political action committee tracker, which in real time would tell you what each political action committee, like American Crossroads, Priorities USA Action, was spending and who they were giving money to. So who is profiting off of all of this, political expenditure money. I think my colleague made this. I think he made this in a hack day because he saw a demo of this that the New York Times was going to do, and he went home and he made it in 24 hours. So, and he came in on Monday and he was like, "Guys, we got to get this up because we're going to beat the New York Times." And then we also, every once in a while, we'll tell you what will happen next. We're in the forecasting game. This is an investigation we did into unemployment insurance. And so every state in the United States has an unemployment trust fund where they collect taxes and then they pay out benefits for people who are unemployed. Now, in 2008, times have been so good that they spent a large portion of their unemployment, like trust funds, like their rainy day fund on roads and schools or whatever. And so when the financial crisis hit and there were just a very small amount, actually a huge amount, sorry, of unemployment, you can see that this is what Oklahoma's trust fund reserves start going down. But this portion right here is the favorite thing I have ever done in my whole entire life, where it says future. That right there, we stopped it in January because it didn't make any sense. Our model stopped making enough sense. But in January, we predicted that they would go insolvent in 6 months or less, and they went insolvent in March and started borrowing from the federal government. And in the end, we predicted, I think there were something like 40 states, 39 out of 50. We predicted 39 out of 50 right. But that's just because one state took like a big lump sum for their unemployment insurance. It wasn't part of our model. So we also sometimes do interesting thought experiments, and I know Steve really likes this one, but this is close to home. We did this investigation into the efficacy of the Housing and Urban Development in the 1968 Fair Housing Act, which is supposed to curb segregation in America's cities. It turns out Westchester just kind of didn't do that, right? Like they just kind of didn't. So what we did is we decided to show Westchester black households as they exist today. So you can see there's a lot down here in the south. There are whole townships up in the north that don't have any black households at all. And what we wanted to show is we wanted to show where would African American households live if they lived near people with the same income as them, if race weren't a factor. And so we talked with a bunch of academics and we ran a bunch of calculations, and it actually turns out they would live pretty much everywhere in Westchester instead of just the south. So you can see the numbers here. Mount Vernon has 15,000 African American households. It would only have 2,000 if this kind of this migration happened. So let's see, the next one we have. So that's what if. So we do a lot of what ifs using math and analysis, and then we also deal with many gigabytes of data. So this is it's from 1890 to today, essentially. African Americans who used to be concentrated in the South moved to northern cities. But what happened when they moved to northern cities is they landed in a neighborhood and they just stayed there. And there was no integration happening for many years. And so what we did, so this looks like a simple one, but this is 28 gigabytes of data, 110 years, and we're going to watch it in less than 30 seconds. So if you move your mouse over the map, wait, let me start over. 1940, you can see African Americans moving into the cities and staying there. So if you watch Chicago, if you watch Southside Chicago, I'll start it over. You can see they just move in there and they just stay. And that's on that's 60% black, like no integration. You can also see the same thing with New York. You can see that they move into places in the Bronx, in Brooklyn, I think means.
Jeff?
Yeah.
So did you look at all of the remigration of blacks down to the South in the 2010 census?
No, it's too new. It actually only goes up to 2000 because they changed all the fields and NHGIS didn't have that, so we didn't actually look at that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The fact that we do real-time data analysis and news reporting based on it, how difficult it is.
It's very difficult.
What are the challenges as a reporter on one hand, and what would you expect from somebody on the technical side to help you?
Let me circle back to that after I finish the rest of the talk, but I will definitely, that's a very good question. So that is our gigabytes of data. That is the best example. And then the other thing that we do sometimes, because we don't have a million reporters, we're a newsroom of 35, we ask our audience for help. So we got 600 people to TV stations in the United States are supposed to disclose how much they're getting for political ad spending, right? But it turns out that there's no centralized database, or there wasn't at the beginning of this thing. So you would have to go, if you were the concerned citizen that I know you guys all are, you would go down to your TV station and you would say, how much is so-and-so spending on your TV, on my local TV station? And then you would have to go to like the CBS affiliate, the ABC affiliate, and they would hand you a piece of paper. And they would charge you for copies if you wanted to take that piece of paper out. So what the FCC did is they made all the TV stations scan all of those and upload them to a website, but the website was just scanned PDFs. In fact, if you tried to put in structured data, if you tried to upload in Excel, it would turn it into a PDF. Which is just like sad times, right? So, like not how you're supposed to do that. So what we did is we put together this news application where we asked people to actually look at those scanned PDFs, tell us 4 or 5 different points of data, and 4 or 5 points of data, like who they bought it for, who they bought it on behalf of, how much it was, and like a tracking number. And by the end of the campaign, I think we started halfway through the campaign. By the end, we had logged $1.6 billion worth of ad buys. Some of that's overlap. That's probably an overestimation because there are some summary reports or duplicates or whatever. But you could basically see, like, swing states get a lot of money. Oh no. Oh no. Okay. So, oh no. Okay, that's why I shouldn't talk so much. Another thing, this is another theme of journalism that we do. We point out contradictions, right? We point out when officials lie to you, you kind of want to say that. So this is the Obama administration's drone claims, and the ones in black are specific facts about the drone program, and the ones in red are them saying the drone program doesn't exist, or there are no specific facts about the drone program. And you can follow it over and you can just kind of read along. And just as it goes along, apparently it still doesn't exist, right? You can't know anything about it. Okay. Dollars for Docs, Find Your Own Stories is another one you can you could put in the, Steve talked about it. And then the final thing that I put together, one of the greatest parts of this job is like you both get tons of data and you get to experiment because we're all trying to figure it out. So I put together my Hack Day project that I put together a couple weeks ago that we didn't end up using. Is this map of the United States, but it's in 3D. So have you guys ever figure out a use case for this? Let me know, because I think it's really cool.
I'm
So that's news apps at ProPublica. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question. I want to take questions. Yeah. But I have one question about dealing with real-time data. It's hard, right? Like we have, so for the message machine projects, the way it worked is everybody would email in their things, and I would get the email immediately and be able to respond to it. There's one of my friends, Aaron Bykoff, actually had he had written a little bit of code that sat on his screen during the whole campaign that told him when a new FEC filing was filed. So he would get an update alert and be able to respond to it right away as soon as that happened. And FEC filings happen a lot, right? Like especially during a campaign. There's the major FEC filings, but then there's also stuff like, oh, we accidentally said we spent, we got only 10,000 from this one guy, but we actually got 100,000 from this one guy. So dealing with that real-time stuff is really, really difficult, and something we've only begun to start figuring out. Like the two apps that we did last year that took user input were pretty much our first ones, right? Usually we deal with big static data sets and aggregate them and make them pretty, you know? So I don't really have an answer on the best ways to do that.
Yeah, I just had a question about the division of labor. I mean, one thing to get all this data and aggregate it and analyze it, but then you have some sensational like presentations and stuff. Is there people doing that kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, we have 6. I mean, we have. It's weird. We have a lot of people that overlap too.
Yeah.
So my colleague Olga Pierce is a great computer assisted reporter statistician. Like went to school for economics. So I'll work with her a lot and do some of the visual stuff, and we'll work out the data model. We also have our car department that consists of Joe Cocaine and Jennifer LaFleur are like the kings of night cars. So we can rely on them for a lot of data cleaning and doing the stuff for that. But we're jack of all trades in our department, right? We do the analysis, we do reporting, we do visualization and back-end server stuff. Like just today, while I was sitting there, I fixed one of our apps. So, all right, guys.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. Catch you later.